All right. Hello, everybody. I think we're live now. I have Penny Bradley with me today. Oh, I apologize for my tardiness. It seems to happen a lot whenever I have a guest that I'm enjoying the conversations with in the background. So I really appreciate you coming on, Penny. And
Thanks for having me.
oh yeah, anytime. You know you're more than welcome. And I assume if today we're doing the Penny Bradley 101, that we'll have to do maybe some follow ups. But
Yeah.
I appreciate so much for being here and
Well,
yeah,
you
to give
said
me
your audience didn't know me and that I needed to introduce them gently.
yeah, it's a lot to take in if you're not into some of these topics or haven't been following them. It's definitely something that you have to be kind of spoon fed for a second.
Yeah, I get that. Yes. I
So
I have trouble sometimes talking to normals because I don't know where to start.
yeah, well, so I was almost wondering if we should talk about childhood to a certain point when you were activated. I didn't know what would be the best jump off point for you. I know you probably have a game plan as well.
Well, I thought that we would start with in 2012, there was this guy on my Facebook wall, Steve Wilhite. Only I knew him as Sierra Volk. That was his NSA code name, and he had profiles under both names. And I was coming off of an antidepressant because it just made me numb. And we were coming up on the thing in 2012, the December 22nd, and it was supposed to be a whole new thing. And I wanted to be fully aware for that. And I was having a hard time with the withdrawal. It takes a good 6 weeks to get it out of your system. And frankly, I was a bitch from hell during that time. I admit it. Um,
That comes
so,
with the addiction territory. I don't think you have to apologize for coming off something like that. It definitely comes in that territory.
yeah, so I contacted this guy that we'd been sort of friends, never really talked. He was in a divorce, and I said, I just I need you to talk to me through this so I don't weaken and go back on it. I'm going through withdrawal and I just need emotional support. And during the time, I was so bitchy that my partner and I had some difficulties, and I ended up agreeing to go meet this guy, real world. And I had no idea what was going to happen. He said, "You hate DC. Why don't I show you the place and show you what's really going on there?" And he did. He showed me K Street, and that's where the lobbyists are. And he said there were trillions of dollars that went through K Street, and that those were the real rulers of the United States, were the lobbyists. And we looked at Congress, we looked at the Supreme Court building. It was being remodeled at the time. The Washington Monument was being remodeled at the time. Um, he offered to take me to Fort Meade. I had an absolute panic attack in his car. I couldn't do it. Um, now, background, I had had flashbacks off and on my entire life of some really bizarre things. And my brain had put them in the form of symbols rather than what had really happened. Well, while I'm in DC with this guy, he keeps driving us past the Mormon tabernacle there, the Mormon temple. And it looks like the Emerald City from Wizard of Oz. And he said that they talked about it so much that the people in DC had put a sign up over, there was a walking bridge that went from one side of the highway to the other side where the temple was. And they had put a sign up that said, "Free Dorothy." Now, I didn't see the sign, but he kept repeating that. And I kept getting these twinges of memories. Didn't say anything because I don't want to freak anybody out. And when I came home to Lou, because I only stayed there, 11 days? It wasn't meant to be permanent. But I got a good tour of the city and how things really operate there from the point of view of an insider. And I came home and I was sick, deathly ill, like I was purging major toxins. And I had this memory dump, except everything was in German. And there were memories of Jurassic Park raptors with feathers eating little kids. And I know that couldn't have happened here. And I went through a lot of research because at the same time, I no longer slept. I still don't sleep unless I take Benadryl to knock me out. Um, I was getting to where I knew I was an interdimensional being before that because I could see things other people couldn't. But at that point, I lost control for a while and I was drifting in and out between different frequencies. And I almost checked myself into a mental hospital. And my partner Lou said, "No, this." He asked me point blank, "Are you a danger to yourself or others?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Then we're not going to put you in a hospital." Okay. So I'm sitting there working through all of this traumatic stuff and figuring out what order it went in, because in the memory dump, the most traumatic stuff was at the top and you had to work through it. First of all, figure out what order it came in, figure out what it was, where it was, who the other people were, because this was the most bizarre thing. The faces were invisible. I have definitely had programming to not remember people's faces.
So that was almost like a block that was put in. It was almost like
Yeah, that
an
was.
erase. Yeah.
Yeah, like the faces were erased. And so I cannot recognize most people from their faces. So they send me pictures and I have no idea if I remember you or not. I have found I remember people's personal energy. I've identified people by their personal energy. My tongue's tripping over itself, sorry. Um, I am human after all. but
Well, and we were talking about this offline. You pick up on these energies a lot more than most people do. You're not going to admit to it, but I think you have a higher level of intuition than most. You can read people's energies. I've seen in conversations where you're answering questions that haven't been asked yet, but it was going to be the next question. And I could just tell you were just a couple steps ahead. So even though you won't admit to it, I have seen this from you in the past.
I'm not doing that consciously. It's like when you open your eyes and you can see. I have trouble controlling the psi. That's what they call it in the programs, is psionics. It's all of the clairs, clairvoyant, clairtransient, all that stuff. My particular skill set is I travel interdimensionally. I'm never in just one frequency. I overlap into three and sometimes four. And I will see them differently. And because my father couldn't see them, he used to beat me for talking about them. So I know what's 3D and what isn't. So I can function in real world. But if I see, and I'm telepathic, extremely telepathic, and I was trained by Draconians. So um, they practice full intimacy telepathy, which means everything in my head, everything in your head. But they don't like telepaths who stomp, and most humans do. I was taught very early on to not stomp in people's heads. So most of the time, I've had people that were with me physically and they were polite with their mouth, but their thoughts as they would pass by me were frankly insulting. And so I would make what's called a front door telepathy connection. It's just a conversation like we're having. I deliberately did not dig. I don't care what's in your head. I just, you know, I didn't appreciate people walking past me calling me a fangirl or a faker or a larper.
So the stomp is kind of like you're almost saying, "Hey, I can hear you. Hey, I'm right here." Is it
This
more like I'm in your face? Like, what's up?
the stomp is they're not holding, they're not tiptoeing through another person's brain, and it can give you a headache.
Okay.
In my case, it can make me physically ill if someone's trying to read me and they're being forceful about it. So yeah, I know when there's someone in my head. And one thing people don't remember is no matter how powerful you are, there's always somebody out there that's more powerful than you are. And if they don't like what you're doing, you're in trouble. And I was trained by Draco, and they're more powerful than I am. So I have this humility about it. I'm not going to stomp in your head. I'm going to enter quietly. You may not even notice I'm there, but you'll hear me talk, and I'll hear what you respond. Now,
So it's not barging in. It's
yeah,
oh, by the way, I'm here.
yeah, I announce myself when I come in. I'm not sitting there listening in to be nosy. I'm there to have a conversation. And when the conversation's over, I quietly leave. I'm not stomping it at all. And um, I have noticed that every time I've done this, the person has been terrified of me afterwards. And I don't understand why, because they're not giving me the feedback about what scared them. So, and I try to keep my abilities contained. Okay, normals have the presumption of privacy in their own heads. It's not a true thing, but they believe it and it's part of their identity. And I try to respect that. I'm not out to cause anybody any harm. Well, once in a while I'll expose somebody that's lying, but I speak the truth. And if that steps on your toes, I'm sorry. You know, you should have been speaking the truth all along and it wouldn't have stepped on your toes. But I'd say my personal memories I can't verify. But there are other people in the community who remember most of them. Uh, Now, as far as the research I do, I'm pretty good about providing sources.
Yeah.
Um, if it's something that I know from doing research, I can usually tell you who I got it from, and sometimes I can give you the link. And I know that's a major change from what a lot of these folks are doing. We've got a lot of people out here who are channelers. Um, we've got a lot of people who, for God only knows what reason, they think this is cool. And they're pretending. And none of those people really have sources. Although I think it's interesting, I've listened to a lot of interviews where it's penny this, penny that, penny the other, or they'll quote Randy, or they'll quote Tony, or sometimes they'll quote Joseph. But yeah, it's like, do you have any memories of your own, or do you just know from watching us? Um, I think it's going to become important for people to understand that this is not a safe thing to do. There's been a lot of pushback, especially the last couple of years. There have been several people in our community who have been killed. Um, some of them, they've made it look like suicides or natural deaths, but the circumstances around it prove it was murder. So we've got Max Spears, William Whitecrow, Mark McCandish. Now, Jim Mars died, but he did have heart disease and he died of that. So his was natural. But the agents that activated me, the actual agent was murdered in the hospital when he was going for a routine lung drain. And
was he the gentleman that was showing you around DC?
yes, he was
Okay.
he was the gentleman that was showing me around DC. I gave you the links to their profiles on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah, I do have that.
And his boss was hit with an ice pellet gun, ice bullet, and the hospital thought he had a stroke and put him in a convalescent hospital, and he died. He eventually died 6 months later, and he left a young widow and a 5-year-old son. So yeah, this is a dangerous place to be. Since I've been talking, I've had 5 friends, people I loved, were murdered because I was talking about the old god religions of the elites and what they are expected to do. So those interviews are on Gale of Gaia, and I won't repeat them. But it's been a hell of a ride. Sorry if cussing isn't allowed on your show.
Oh no, you're fine. I all my shows are set for 18 plus. Um,
Okay.
I wanted to ask because I think this is I told you kind of my interest in Andrew and how I kind of fell into this community. Um, what I think makes Andrew's and your story so good is the merit behind you guys as well. So, would you be interested in talking about I don't know, like your scholarship to Cornell, any of your actual? I mean, you're not somebody that like on books would look like a crazy person. Like you don't look like you're a very intelligent person. You do your own research. I know you've done work in biology. I know you've done work in physics. Um, if you'd like to talk about that, I think it would. I think it adds validity to your story as well.
Okay. I was growing up in California. I attended the local labor camp schools because we were on a dairy, a Portuguese dairy. So I grew up speaking Portuguese, English, and Spanish from school because I went to school with the Braceros kids. The Bracero program in California was to bring in farm workers from Mexico for the crop harvest season and then send them home. Well, a lot of them figured out how they could stay over the winter and have their kids go to American schools. And the county I lived in, Tulare County, had permanent labor camps with houses. And they would move their family in there, and the kids would go to school with the other farm worker kids, which is what I was. I was a farm worker kid. And we had teachers who spoke Spanish and English, and the left side of the board would be in Spanish and the right side would be in English. And I went to school that way up until about 6th grade. So I grew up trilingual. And when we got into junior high, they gave us a choice of what language we wanted to learn. And so I chose French because my mother's people were French. And at the time, for University of California, you had to have a certain list of topics that you had studied and learned because you were expected to pass tests entrance tests whenever you came to university. And I was trying to go to a university straight out. And my guidance counselor was promoting this. By that time, my father had been hurt at work. We were on welfare. My father was abusive. Everybody at the school knew this. I would come to school with bruises all over the place. And in those days, CPS didn't do a whole lot about it. So, side issue, my high school principal had been my father's tennis coach in high school. And my father had beat the holy shit out of him one day with a tennis racket. So when my dad would show up, the principal would just sit there and just shake the whole time Dad was in the room. I felt sorry for the man and did my best to keep Dad out of the school.
So there was no safety net in the school of this is a safer place for me to be than home?
School was safer than home. And Dad had this thing that homework always came first. So I always made sure I had lots of homework. And I was really good at math, which shocked everybody because theoretically girls don't like math. I did. I was really good at math. And in those days, I was good at picking up languages. It's a lot harder when you're in your 60s. I'm trying to learn Latin and it's beating me. But so we had moved again, and after Dad got hurt, and he had used his insurance money to buy a house, and we were still on welfare. And yes, guys, that was legal because we lived in it. But he was constantly working on building it bigger because I'm the oldest of 5 kids. And so I learned a lot of construction because we built the house. And so I know a lot about a lot of weird things that girls don't normally. And it's gotten me in trouble over the years because husbands get upset when you know more about it than they do. But Dad had been a preacher when I was little. And he had gotten to the point where Mom kept having a kid every year and a half. And he got to the point where the church couldn't support that large of a family. So he went back to dairy work. And we were Church of Christ Auntie, which is a cult. It's like Amish light in a lot of ways. except they're very legalistic. And so I had programming to be a church mouse, and I really bought into it. I remember believing this stuff, but when my memories were activated, all that was gone. Now, in high school, I was a national merit finalist. I didn't have straight A's, but I was 19th in my class out of 257. My guidance counselor had paid for me to take tests for scholarships, had sat with me and helped me fill out the applications. I had a dozen scholarships, and I was a finalist for the Edison Scholarship, which if I had won would have been $2,000 a year for 4 years. Didn't get that one. I came in second. Yeah. They told me, "Well, you almost got it. We hope to not have to see you in court as a lawyer for the ecologists. Here, you can have one of our stocks."
How did that go?
That was their actual consolation prize, was a share of their stock. And
no, I'm just saying, did the stock earn any value, or was it?
Oh yeah, it's had 2 stock splits since, so it's now 4 shares, and they're worth about $100 a piece.
Eventually, it'll get to that $2,000.
Yeah, eventually. It was so funny because first it was 38 cents a quarter was the dividend. I think it's up to $3 now. But that's just inflation. But yeah, and Southern Cal Edison was doing that then. And dad was like, "Okay, cool, we're going to let you go do this, blah, 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 blah." It was my senior year. I was 17 because I was born in the fall. You know, I was 17, and I got this award letter from Cornell University. They were accepting me into their School of Engineering at the 3rd year they were allowing women into it. I had applied to Caltech, and they said no because I was female. They were not accepting women at all. I had already visited Caltech and JPL as a freshman in high school, and my phone's been tapped ever since. Every so often I get mad and go, "Are you enjoying listening to me?" Cop an attitude at them. But yeah, they've been watching me since I showed up at JPL. JPL is a jet propulsion lab where a lot of the work for the Apollo program was actually done. It's also referred to as Jack Parsons' lab because he founded it.
No, for some reason I was thinking Bob Lazar had some kind of involvement with that as well.
I don't remember that part. I thought he was at Lawrence Livermore.
And then I thought there was an under one that he was in and got raised to some kind of engineering department. I could be mistaken.
I'm not sure all of Bob Lazar's story. It's been a while since I read it. I haven't listened to a lot of the videos.
But yeah, anyway,
I think Bob Lazar is real, by the way. I think he's told the straight truth, and people just treated him like he was a fool. I think they've been very harsh to him, and he's another example of what happens when you do tell the truth. They discredit you, destroy you.
Well, and he's another one of those great minds where it's like, oh, if you knew he had created his own propulsion car with a jet engine. And it's like, oh yeah, these are the people that they're watching. these smart people are the ones that they're keeping an eye on.
Yeah. So I had 3 kids that wanted to live in the hospital. They have congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which, by the way, comes from the Stewart family, the descendants of Robert the Bruce. This is one of the hereditary diseases of the family. I and their father were both descendants of Robert the Bruce, and that's where it came from. But all 3 of my kids had it, so I had to take time out. I had been a programmer. Oh, Daddy, back to the scholarship. The award letter came, and I was 17, and Dad opened it, and he read it out loud, and he looked at me straight on, and in his sternest voice, he said, "Girls need husbands. They don't need degrees." And he ripped it up in front of me.
I remember you saying that when you were talking to Andrew, in your guys' interview, that he ripped that up. I was like,
yeah,
that is insane.
It was a full scholarship for 4 years to an Ivy League school. It included full tuition and support, totaling approximately $14,000. And he shredded it. And I still wonder how different my life would have been if I had been able to go there. I asked my grandfather to give me the money for the bus ticket to go to Ithaca, New York, because I was going to run away and do it. And he says, "What does your father say?" And I said, "He says girls need husbands, not degrees." And Grandpa says, "Well, then you have your answer." People think this is the dark ages where all of this crap stopped. It's not. It's in my lifetime. Ruth
Bader Ginsburg.
Yes, she is the one who pushed it through the Supreme Court that women were adult human beings with personal responsibility for our own actions.
And it depends on the level you're at. Like if maybe the average person doesn't deal with it as much, but depending on what level you're at when it comes to a business, a company, the government, they probably still don't want to. I mean, we still haven't had a woman president. I don't think we should do it just because she's a woman, but regardless, I don't think we're getting most of the best presidents. I just think the best person in any position should be there. And
exactly.
For the longest time,
no matter what their gender, what their race, the best person for the job should have it.
Yeah, because the correcting side is just as bad. I don't want you to put a minority or an opposite sex in there just because you're trying to fill a quota. Like it's more about getting the best qualified people.
Yes, get the best qualified people and put them in there. And I was really trying to be the best qualified person. And that's what a lot of people aren't understanding. My father, by the time I was 19, my parents were throwing a shit fit because I was 19 and not married and had no prospects. So my mother found me a partner. Yeah, really. She went on a hunt for a preacher from the Church of Christ, auntie, and that was willing to marry a girl geek. So, she found this guy from Southern California, and we got married, and we had the 3 kids, and the marriage lasted a whole 10 years. He wanted to be a prison chaplain, and in California, that means you have to have a Master's of Divinity. Well, he was also very dyslexic and actually read at about 3rd grade level. And from the point we married until we divorced, I did all of his homework for him because he couldn't read. One of our sons also came out very dyslexic and had a really hard time reading. And we got books on tape for him so that he wouldn't be an uneducated horse's ass. You know, just because they can't read doesn't mean they have to be stupid.
Yeah.
So,
and separating it isn't going to help it. So you gotta do whatever you can to, you know, find ways around it.
These days, I would be homeschooling. I have seen the school system go absolutely to hell in a handcart from the time that Ronald Reagan ran California, and destroyed our school system, and then he went to the federal level and destroyed the federal school system. So, and it's only gone downhill from there. The first thing they did was stop teaching critical thinking. When I was in high school, sophomores, we're talking 15-year-olds, in both English and geometry, were taught logic. There was a 6-week course that was taught in both classes. So some of us got it twice. We were taught logic. You have to understand logic before you can think critically. Okay, now we've got a whole generation of people who don't even understand what logic is. They don't trust anything. They do know they're being lied to, so they don't trust anything. And they're buying into Dark Ages dogmas that I thought were long dead. And I'm completely fucking mortified. I represent the best of what the public school system had in California before Reagan. Okay?
Do you think some of it came with the distrust of the government in the 50s and 60s?
I think what happened was they saw a generation of kids thinking for themselves, deciding they did not want to go to Vietnam. They did not want to deal with apartheid. We are why apartheid is no longer in South Africa. I'm that group, the group that rioted over apartheid. We rioted over race relations. We rioted over the war in Vietnam. If you don't know the term sit-in, you should learn it. We also had rap sessions for returning Vietnam vets. Okay, I have applied that concept to the SSP and super soldiers because we come back completely traumatized and we do not fit into normal society, period. The only way we will survive and become anywhere near normal is if we have group sessions where we support each other. Now, do you know what happened before the group of, there were, I think, 4 women that were part of this. Me, Ileana the Star Traveler, Morgan Starr, and Cynthia Bolter. We put this in place in one group that grew outrageously. We called it a group therapy session. Actually, what we were doing was recreating the rap session, but for a different group of veterans. And I have to put it in quotes so we're not violating the stolen valor laws. We are veterans of a different service, but we're not recognized, so we can't use the term.
That was so well put, because there's a lot of people in the SSP community that don't talk like that. And they often get accused of stolen valor. And they almost immediately jump to that people in the SSP community don't respect the military. That's
We
what
do.
the outsider perspective is, and it's like, no, they're not trying to walk on the backs of other people. They were just saying this service hasn't been recognized, and hey, this happened.
Yeah.
I think there's a way big difference.
This happened. It's real. Most of us did not sign up for it. I was 4 years old when I was taken. And if you can find any law book that says that that was legal, I'm interested in hearing it, because as far as I'm concerned, there were major felonies related to my service. Um, I understand from regression hypnosis, and I have that available if necessary, um, and from the testimony of Doris Neely, who was a CIA archivist, and we can verify that she worked there because she sued them for racial discrimination. There are court records about that, so there's proof she worked there.
Let me jump in and kind of validate some of that a little bit too. Um, People in my community might know who Daryl Neely is. This is a relative of, yeah, they're directly related. A lot of the people in my community either came from different shows where that we either talked to Andrew Basiago or somebody like that, so they knew the sphere. And I've also had Gary on here a few times. And Daryl used to produce shows for, I believe, Penny, Gary, and a lot of other people. Yeah.
He was my producer and my counterbalance if I got too dark, and he would take over if I alter shifted too badly.
Fair enough. But that's how because she's also the person that you're referencing is also the one that confirmed Andy's involvement in the CIA as well, and as well as his father's.
She also confirmed a dozen of the Montauk survivors.
Okay.
So the group in my first Montauk roundtable, she verified that every one of them actually, she had files on them for their service at Montauk. So they were all real. And they keep telling me I was there. I don't actually remember it, but I have found that I can pick them out of a lineup, the ones that were there. And if I wasn't there, I don't know how I can do that. So,
I would say, just like I said offline, I think it has to do with you have more abilities than most.
Okay. So, yeah. All of the Montauk folks that I've worked with also were in SSP. So there's a lot of overlap, and they were in other programs too. Now, when I was 4, we lived in one of those silver trailer houses, the kind you put on the back of the pickup and just haul it.
Yeah, like mobile home.
Yeah, it was sort of a mobile home, but it was just a little bigger than a normal travel trailer for the day. And we lived in that, and there was a metal step on the outside. I think I remember Dad making a wooden one over it, but I can't be sure. And one night in the summer of '59, everybody else in the house was asleep, and these guys, humans in green fatigues, came and pulled me out of my bed, put me in a Korean War Jeep, also Army green. There were other kids in the back of it, and they started driving us to Langley. They used the tunnels that are now the maglev train, and when they weren't on those, they were using the old Highway 66. And we drove at night on the highway, so no one would notice a Jeep full of kids. And by the time we got to Langley, I had been mind wiped. So that's important for when I come back. when I came back, I didn't remember my family. And I had been speaking German the whole time, so I couldn't speak English. And to my mom, this was, she was 20. She was in this religious cult. She had dropped out of high school to marry my dad. She was not terribly sophisticated. To her, amnesia was a mental illness or you were faking. So several months later, I told my kindergarten teacher that Martians had left me on the doorstep. And she beat my ass for that. She said, I gave birth to you. You're my child. So after I got my memories back, I said, you know, Mom, you remember I told the kindergarten teacher that Martians left me on the doorstep? And she started screaming again. She was in her 80s and she's already screaming at me about it. And I told her, well, you know, I was abducted by humans who worked on Mars. Now, that's another thing that's different from my story and most of everybody else. I was abducted by men who appeared to be military. And I
wanted to ask you a question about all that.
And I was taken to an Air Force base.
Okay.
So this is all military.
So when I've heard some of your past interviews when you were talking about Mars, this might confuse everybody in the chat, but you'll catch up, I promise. You were talking about how that felt more like home. Did you have a childhood there and then get brought here? Because a lot of people, it would be hard for them to grasp because you haven't started talking about Mars besides a little glimpse into the raptors with the feathers. Okay. But yeah, you brought up the childhood.
I spent 5 years at Langley with a side trip to Montauk that lasted about 6 months.
Okay.
Now, during that 5 years, I was mind fractured into a full 13 by 13 by 13 cubic hierarchical array. That comes to just shy of 2,200 altars if you do the math. I think it's 2,197. So I have that many altars. At this point in time, I have reintegrated 38 of them. When I reintegrated an altar that was a navigator, the CIA broke my shoulder and I had to have a 4-hour surgery. I'm talking, this is not a consciousness event. This is physical. This is 3D real in this timeline. And that's what people keep trying to push me off of. This is physical. It's done by the military. It's done by the CIA. It's done by Doris said my file came from the OSS. Now, officially, the OSS was disbanded 10 years before I was born. But that's where she said my file came from, that they are who manipulated my DNA to make me a navigator. And they claim ownership of me. And they transferred that ownership to the CIA in the 1980s when she had my file. Now, I also had an altar that was in a cloned body that served with her in the 1980s in the DC CIA office. I do not have those memories yet. And I say yet because I'm still reintegrating altars. But I've been put through hell since I came public. I had an older injury from my first husband where my neck was broken, and that's what this scar is from. It's from spinal fusion surgery. And the surgeon cut the nerve to my vocal cord during the surgery. So Was it an accident? Did the CIA ask him to silence me? Yeah, it's been a wild ride. And in the meantime, I keep getting called a fake. I keep getting called a liar. I keep getting called all kinds of things. And mostly it's from agents who are trying to discredit me because I'm telling the truth. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are listening to a couple of folks out there that are blowing smoke.
Let me actually a chat came up that was kind of addressed towards that. They were asking a question. It was Gonzo, and he was asking, is there any people who pretend to be in said programs?
Yes, there are. There are a lot of people who, for some unknown reason, think we're making it all up, that we're playing a game, and that if we're going to play a game, they're going to play with us. I would say probably 2/3 of the people public are in that category. Some of them are deliberately doing it. Others have listened to too many videos and then had dreams and convinced themselves that they were. And then we've got the ones, well, the psychic said. Now, I know there are real psychics. I know there are some really talented ones. Uh, there are some great readers. We're going to have some really great readers at our conference. Sean Bond, Matthew Mornian, those are just off the top of my head. We have others going to be there too.
I know Sean. I know he's done some good work.
I served with Sean in Time Corps.
I was going to ask you that question at some point. I was going to ask you, you had a short, I don't know, a list of people that you can confirm that you've worked with, or I think it would help people out in the audience trying to connect the dots with all the people they hear on the internet talking about this stuff. And I think there's a few people that are pretty well known that you have connections with. And
okay, James Rink is my commanding officer in Kruger.
Okay.
But the story he tells about Kruger does not match the story that I remember. So he has his version, I have mine. Joseph Powell was the commanding officer that I blew up his head because he was sexually assaulting me. He had reached I kept reporting him to Oberkommando in Nachtwaffen, the German fleet, and they did nothing. And they did nothing. And they would send the reports to him. So every report I sent, he got angrier and angrier and angrier, and the abuse got worse. And the final straw was there were 4 officers on our ship who were sadists. They put their partners in the hospital, and he ordered me to service them. And I blew up his head because I was done.
It was nice hearing you and Joseph talk about this currently, like within the last 5 years, and you guys were able to laugh about it. You guys can laugh about it now, but
he got even. Because my intention was not to kill him; it was to make him stop. So I put him in regen. I didn't leave him dead. On the interview, he said he was having the most fun of his life until he felt my psi ability kick in. Nervous laugh here. Yeah, I concentrated on the fluid, cerebrospinal fluid in his 3rd ventricle, which is the center of your brain where your pineal gland is. And I simply heated it up until his head exploded. And after he was regenerated, he would, for about 8 months, he would tie a rope around me and put me out the airlock. And as soon as he knew I was good and dead, he would haul me back and put my ass in regen. And as soon as I was out the airlock again. So yeah, we had this hate relationship. And it was based on he wanted to screw me, and I said no. Now, Nachtwaffen does something that's really harsh. They send all of your records of all of your altars to your commanding officer. So anything you've ever done in any altar, they know about that. Now, Nachtwaffen has a policy that regular sex makes more productive employees. And the women are expected to service the men. It's part of your job description. It's not exactly rape, but it's really close. And I would have a policy of finding a higher officer and becoming his mistress so I was protected from the rest. And I make a really good second in charge. I'm that support person who sits there and analyzes what's going on around you, and I can point out the things you're missing. And that's really valuable to a captain of a large ship. And so that was what he wanted from me. But he should have gone about it more seduction and less assault.
Fair enough.
Now, in these programs, when you are out in space, the women are kept at 25 years old. Now,
why is that?
Because they're prettiest then.
Oh, because it's the prime. It's the prime of their life.
It's the prime of their life. They keep men between 30 and 35 because it's the prime of their life when they are the most physically powerful. Yes, exactly. They are a very patriarchal group, misogynist in a lot of ways. And I was stuck there. What are you supposed to do? I was 9 years old when I was turned over to the Germans on Mars. Okay, I spent 25 years on Mars. I was 9 when I got there. I remember growing up on Mars. First, it's home. The air is almost breathable. If you have an oxygen with water mist, you can be outside without an airlock suit. You do, in the daytime. At night it gets too damn cold. But you can be out in, thermals and jeans and boots. You can go outside like that as long as you have this thing that gives you extra oxygen and water in it, because the air is so dry it just sucks it right out of you.
So
The place is crawling with insects and reptiles. They eat anything that grows. They eat each other. We tried growing a garden above ground while I was in Schule. Yes, the Germans, when they got us, they put us in school. That's the first thing they did. 10 years in their school. And you learned their version of history, you learned their version of science, you learned their version of math, and they're using base 60 instead of base 10. And then all of the irrational numbers are suddenly rational. Their math makes more sense. They know the real astronomy. They're not listening to NASA's lies. and all of the housing is underground. Well, I understand that since I left in 1990, that they have been building domed cities in craters. So those are some of the things that are blanked out on Google Mars. They try to make it look like it's an empty crater instead of having a dome. But they're working on terraforming the place. There is an ecology there, but it's the survivors of a full ecology, and they are what's left after half the atmosphere was stripped off, the oceans dried out, and there was a nuclear war in the north. And you can tell from the isotopes they've found that there was a nuclear war. That's what blew up Cydonia, was a nuclear war.
Was that what we now call the asteroid belt?
No, that may have happened about the same time. The asteroid belt used to be a full planet. Earth is okay, there was a rock about the size of the moon in the Earth's orbit before this. But there was a big planet there. It was a water world like we are. And the top half, or probably top third to quarter, came off, and it and the moon came together, and that chunk collided with the rock that was already here. And you'll find science has proven that there are two cores on Earth now. One was the original rock, and the other one was this piece of that other planet. And you can still see it when you look at not the globe demonstrations, but when you look at the planet from the outside, the side with the Pacific is flatter. It still hasn't completely rounded. Now, the Bible talks about all the land was in one place. That was because there was one continent that came with that chunk. And as it has been spun, you know how we rotate our daily rotation, as it has spun, it has slowly become rounder and rounder and rounder, but the Pacific Ocean is still pretty flat. And if you look at straight on the middle of the Pacific, you can't see any land.
Interesting.
That's the side that was attached to the rest of the planet.
I need to jump in for a minute because there's questions coming in, and I want to keep everybody caught up because I think everybody's following along pretty well. Gonzo had another question.
I feel like I'm rambling. No,
not at all.
How do people travel to Mars? There are jump gates on Earth. That's how most people travel to Mars. There's one on Sepulveda Boulevard in Los Angeles. That's the one that Andy Pajago used. There's one on Long Island in New York. That's the one that I used. There are more. I just don't know where the others are.
For some reason, I thought there was one in New Mexico as well. That was.
It's very likely. Dulce may have one. Dulce Base.
Okay. Can you confirm anything about Dulce Base? The existence of it, anything? I was always curious. I always had an interest in Dulce Base and the cooperative effort between, well, I don't know if you'd call it cooperative or contractual, but between the aliens and the humans and actually working in a facility together.
Those are aliens you cannot trust, and yet our government does. And they are conducting biological research and giving the government information from that research in exchange for doing what they want to the people they have. President Carter did declare war on them at one point, um, because he heard about 20,000. I believe it was 20,000. I may have that number wrong. But he heard about 20,000 American women being held there for reproductive purposes, and his Baptist self was mortified. So he declared war on them, and Phil Schneider was
Yeah, when they were
somehow
drilling.
involved with that. And
Yeah, yeah, that's
it's
another
real.
person. I think
It's
Phil Schneider's. If anybody in the chat knows Phil Schneider, his story is another one of those ones that he just pretty much self-exited. Apparently,
no, he
yeah.
didn't.
No,
He
I don't
was
agree with it. I
he,
don't
he
agree
was
with it at all. But
he was
according to the
murdered.
autopsy, yeah, according to the autopsy, somehow he strangled himself. If you were to strangle yourself with something, what happens is,
He was strangled with a catheter. You
well,
know,
this is how you
the
know.
kind
Yeah,
of the kind of catheter they use whenever a man is having bladder problems.
yeah, they stick inside of you. But my thing is, so say if it was just sitting on the shelf, if you were to strangle yourself with anything, what happens is your body would pass out and you would release the strangle, and it wouldn't
Exactly.
happen. But somehow, that's how this autopsy was written, and that's why I was like,
And
yeah, there's a bunch of red flags here.
how would he have found a catheter in a hotel?
Oh, I
He
thought it was at his house. I didn't know it was in a hotel.
No, it was in a hotel hallway. He was murdered, flat
But
out
yes,
murdered. So was Bill Cooper, because he told us about not to believe what they said about Osama bin Laden.
yeah.
Yeah.
But so with the Phil thing, if anybody hasn't followed Phil's story, he drills underground domes, and that's what he was involved with a lot of his work. And there's also some stuff about Valiant Thor as well. But the big one when he was talking about when he was drilling for Dulce bases, they came across a cavern that had a species in it basically that had been living there for a long time, and it
It
triggered
was
the
it
scene.
was another Dulce base, and the it had humans there with them protecting them. So he there were humans shooting back at him. This was a government base with these guys, and Phil was like, "Oh my God, they're reptilians. They stink like sulfur. It smells horrible. Shoot." If he hadn't,
That's what the Green Berets did.
yes, that's what they did. They immediately shot. They never tried to make contact. They had no idea what they were dealing with. They had no idea that this base was there in their path.
That's the part I don't think makes sense. They had to have known. Somebody knew. The
Somebody
Green
knew, but
Berets.
they didn't tell Phil.
Yeah, no. Phil didn't know. Yeah, but there was a reason the Green Berets were there that day when they were drilling. All of a sudden, you got a military force there just to be safe. We're just gonna bring in the Green Berets. You don't just bring in the Green Berets for a hunch. Like,
no, you don't. Yeah. There's a lot of things that don't make sense in some of the stories, and it's real easy to just sort of poke holes in them, but you have to realize Phil didn't know that base was there.
Yeah, I agree.
So he's coming from he's this religious person. He comes into a situation with creatures he's never imagined even existed. They smell bad, so he assumes they're demonic. And yeah, a lot of grays do stink to high heaven. Side story, on Mars, we got tired of smelling one that was assigned to our unit. And we took him down and scrubbed him with cleaning products. And that was how we found out that they make them drunk.
Oh gosh. Like, okay, so
like Drano and ammonia, and we used ammonia on him.
My only question is, did it get to the point of he was so intoxicated that he couldn't do anything, or like, are we
Oh
talking
yeah,
angry drunk alien?
he would sit and giggle.
Oh, okay.
It was the giggle kind, but they
Gotcha.
eat and poop through their skin, and yes, they stink to high heaven. Um, they do. It is horrid, but yeah, cleaning products make them drunk.
I'm gonna try to catch up the chat. I also want to get back to, because we stopped at Joseph
Okay,
Powell, of people that you
how
worked
does
with.
how does the gate work? The gate looks like an elevator in a building, and it has two sets of controls. One is actually the elevator, and the other one goes through the back. The walls disappear. It takes on an oval shape, and they do tell you when you get in it not to touch the walls, to stay huddled in the middle. And you're you're going through a wormhole, and it's like there's some sort of a it feels like a plexiglass tube, but it's not really. So it's an energy thing, and you travel, and it takes about 20 minutes to get from New York to Mars. We went to Ares Prima that way. That's how
Is
the Germans say it.
is that one of the same uh, devices of travel that people had to hold their breath in?
You have to hold your breath if you're not in the device. If you're just okay, there is a Stargate technology. It doesn't work exactly the same way as the TV show, of course, but yeah, you have to hold your breath in that because you go through a space with no air.
Okay, because that was another point I saw Andy make about why they had kids do it. Because sometimes adults would panic and they'd like gasp, and they weren't good at holding their breath before they jumped in.
Well, you have to be trained first. You can't just do it. Although this particular jump gate, it brings the air with you, so you don't have to do it with that.
So you're in a bubble. As long as you're not
Yeah.
traveling too far, you shouldn't use up the oxygen in there.
Well, this is a simple connection between Earth and Mars. It doesn't go
Okay.
anywhere else.
Oh, okay.
Portals are wormholes. They have a discrete beginning and a discrete end, even if they're artificial. You can't just move the end while you're in it. So it's literally a hole through hyperspace.
Hopefully that helps everybody. Guys,
Hyper,
also,
hyperspace is the place between the frequencies. Okay, we talked about this when we were talking. It's like FM channels. Uh, it starts at what, 92 and goes to 102, something like that. So there are 22 frequencies in current reality. And when you're on the frequency, it's physical. But when you're between the frequencies, it's not. And you can travel through it. But it leaves a permanent hole when you do. So what they've done is they've somehow created this hole and then set up shop on both ends. And they have de facto a trolley that goes back and forth between. Now, I don't know how that technology works. That wasn't something explained to me.
there were somebody else was also asking, can it be seen with the naked eye, or is it like that in between, like you were saying, when it comes to frequencies, when you're doing the travel through the jump room, is it something that anybody outside of it could witness, or is it
No,
something that okay,
you have it's something that, as far as reality, 3D reality, you just pop out. You're gone.
gotcha. And then Denise also asked, Penny, did you ever hear of Nancy? Is it Thames?
She runs a group I'm in. I've not talked to her. So it's someone I know of but don't know personally.
And then a couple comments agreeing with what you were talking about, and they said reptilian ETs smell bad, and uh, I've always heard that the reptilians thought humans smelled horrible.
Oh
Um,
God, they do. Most of them think we smell bad.
yeah.
Uh, what people are smelling with the reptilians are their pheromones.
Okay.
Uh, and if you have reptilian in your DNA, in your makeup, you will think they smell really good. And if you don't, you'll think they smell really bad. So when people talk about reptilians stinking, I go, aha, they don't have reptilian DNA. Simple. They they out themselves.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I get it. Um, so
It's like
back.
humans generally think the opposite sex smells good, even more so if they have a compatible immune system.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basic
Have
basic
you
biology.
another question? Have you ever seen them heal people?
The reptilians?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I've seen them heal people. I've seen them I've seen them dispense justice. I've seen them make deals. I've seen them do diplomacy. I've seen them bend over backwards to not have to destroy a world. Um, I've seen them put people into region. The region tanks that are used by the Germans are actually Manted technology, and it's leased, and I don't know what the terms of that lease are, but the Germans don't own it.
I had a question about the regen technology, and I actually asked some of my previous guests about this too. Um, the only way I can picture it, like outsiders' perspective on it, is I think of the TV show Stargate, and I think of the sarcophagus that they have that heals all ailments. But when they actually do use it, it kind of like takes a piece of their humanity away. Like it heals them, but it doesn't necessarily make them better than when they went in.
That's more like what they use in Solar Warden.
Okay.
That's what the med beds do. Um, this is a tank. It's 2 meters across, 3 meters deep, door at the top. It's filled with a gel that's made out of black goo that has had its sentience removed and it's programmed to regenerate. In fact, on the outside of the tank, there's a thing about the size of a Apple tablet, but it has a little slot in it where you can put a blood sample. And if you have as little as a little finger left of a person, you can put it in the tank and it will regrow the person complete. And
Consciousness, all of it.
all of it.
Okay.
Now, if they've been dead for more than 4 months, they will have no more memory. So the longer they're dead, the less memory they have when they come back. So that's something that's something that was really freaky. Um, I don't know how it affects them mentally. I know that I've been in regen enough um, that there were times I wondered if they left me dead. Because when you're in this tank, the walls are opaque. So you're in this gel that's body temperature, so you don't feel it. It's like a fish in water. You don't feel it because there's no temperature differential, there's no air in the way. And so it's one of those places where you have no sensations. I can't think of the right word for it right now. Um,
But yeah, I'm thinking of like a womb, and I'm thinking of like a weightlessness, and you're just kind of there, no exposure.
Desensitization tank, I think it's called.
Oh,
Um,
I know what
they
you're talking about.
they imitate it here with salt water, but
Yeah,
there you're in this gel and you eat it, you drink it, you breathe it, you poop into it. This
isolation tanks. I just thought
Yeah,
of
it's an
float
isolate.
tanks.
It's de facto an isolation tank. You have no inputs the whole time you're in it, and I have become conscious inside it and wonder, gee, did they leave me dead this time? Because you can't feel anything and it's totally dark.
Um, I want to jump back to because we did kind of get running around, but I remembered where some of the other ones we left off were. I
Okay,
was asking you other people you had worked with, and then we got stuck on Joseph for a little while and
Joseph.
explained Joseph. Were there any other people after Joseph, or because you said James Rink?
There's
I think
James
you said
Renning,
Joseph.
there's Joseph, there's Will Glover.
Okay.
Will Glover is probably the best telepath I've ever seen. Um, I was seriously shocked by some of his abilities because we were talking in email, present time, running it back and forth. He wasn't on social media at the time. And he linked up with me telepathically and took me to see his altar looking at my altar on the ship where Joseph was our commander. And I was looking at myself through his altar's eyes. That is seriously impressive work. I'm awed by that. I can't even approach that. Like I said, there's always someone better.
It's better in a different way. I mean, you haven't jumped into this yet, but it reminds me of your ability as a pilot to pull things with you into other things. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
the transportation of things. He's able to do that on a psi level.
yeah,
That's very interesting.
yeah, he can do that. And yes, he was an enlisted man on our ship, but he was a bridge officer and I don't remember what his job was. I had him he was the first person I interviewed when I was doing my own show. When I was originally coming as a podcast and I was just presenting my friends. He was the first person I interviewed. Um, who else is real? Matt Tracy is real. He and
You don't have to say who's real or not. Just people that you know you worked with. I don't
I've
want you
worked.
to. You don't have to call people out or anything.
Okay, Matt Tracy and I worked on several ships because navigation is shift work, and we would relieve each other. And on other altars of his, he works in engineering. So he works on the machinery, on how things work. And I've done several interviews with him when he remembered how certain devices would work. And he would go into all of that. Um, he does, I mean, real world, he's truck driver, you know. Um, in Louisiana. And I remember Steve, the NSA agent,
Mhm.
was at Langley with me. He was number 5 and I was number 7. And on Mars, he was who set up the MarsNet. Here he was bilingual English and Russian. Uh, the Defense Department school had taught him Russian. There he was trilingual English, Russian, and German. And out there we speak Schwabish, which here is considered to be hillbilly German, but it's the main dialect out there. Uh, he set it all up, and he all of the stuff that everybody talks about being on the glass pads, he's who did that, all of it. He was an absolute genius with that. He was murdered in December of 2016 here. Um, who else was really out there that worked with me? There's a woman who used to be public. She lives in Australia. She is also on James Rink's Kruger crew. Um, she's now in her 40s, has a couple of kids, has chosen to pull back because of pushback. She's trying to be their equivalent of a registered nurse. And they're really pissy about insane. They've taken kids away from people who talked about UFO sightings. So,
Makes sense. If she's having a family now, it makes sense that she's pulling away,
yeah,
especially when your family's young and you got other
yeah.
stuff to worry about.
Oh, yeah. I don't push anybody to be public. It's dangerous to be public, especially if you have kids. If you have anybody you actually care about, you should think 3, 4 times before opening your mouth publicly. Uh, the targeting is outrageous.
So I wanted to ask you a favor, and it'll kind of like gauge out where we're at, how long we're gonna go. I still have a huge list of questions. Would you
Okay,
mind if we took an intermission for like I don't know 5-10 minutes? I could use the bathroom and
that
uh,
sounds good about now, yes.
okay, all right, perfect. So everybody watching in the chat, if you guys have any questions, start following them into the chat, and when we get back in, we'll call it 5-10 minutes. Then we will see you guys in a short period of time and get you all your questions. All right. I will see everybody soon. We're going to leave this live up. We're not going to restart. So I will talk to everybody shortly. All right. Let's get this firing back up. So yeah, I appreciate everybody tuning in so far and getting all this started. I appreciate the participation. Sorry, no, I'm tripping over my tongue. Right. Welcome back, Penny. Yeah, we can continue where we were at, where we were talking about people involved with your service. I'm sorry if I phrased that wrong. Um, I yeah, I was always interested in your connections with everybody because
Mhm.
it helps me figure out everybody's stories and where the overlap is, and everybody's experience kind of has a little bit of overlap here and there. Um,
Mhm.
and a lot of people, like you were saying to me offline, invoke your name a lot, and
Yeah.
that's why I wonder how many of them are actually have had experiences with you or are just using your name. So
Okay. There is a gentleman who was my commanding officer in an altar. It was a 20 and back because I was supposed to be part of Kruger, and he was at that point, he was a captain, and he got promoted several times during our 25 years working together. Um, he is no longer public because he's a police officer in Australia. And to be honest, he started being mind wiped a lot and by the end of our discussions, he had very little memory in common with me. Um, and I've let him go dark. He couldn't use his real name to begin with because at that point he was the equivalent of a 911 operator. And so I had called him Herr Mayor. He's a large man. He's around 6'3", maybe more, and fills the door. Large man, Scottish descent, and he's someone I worked with, and I was very emotionally attached to, and it really hurt whenever he started coming up with some of the things that he did the last time we talked. Um, However, it was that they altered his memory. It was designed to drive a wedge between us, and it worked. Uh,
is it permanent? Like, is there still a wedge there?
there was a secondary problem of every time I started talking to him very much, his wife started giving him hell. So I've just backed off entirely, let the man have a happy life.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and it's one of
I'm,
those
I'm,
things that's going to bring up a lot of, past past experiences, and it would really confuse somebody in their current, situation.
um, one of the things that we had was he told me to get dressed up, that we were going out. And so I did. And we went to this bar, and he used it as a time to dress me down. You know, he actually gave me a ride up off the ship, away from the others. He maintains he was within his rights and that I was out of line when I slapped him, or actually I punched him. And Tomas Alvin was the barkeeper. It's not like we worked together, but I do remember him there. Um, that was before his descent back into his habits. So I'm not going to go into dissing him on air. So,
Oh yeah, no, I don't blame you.
you know,
That's
he,
that's a wild experience that you can. It sucks that you're stuck with it, and then
yeah,
you know it's there, and nobody else can address it, and you can't even tell them about it because it'll mess up the things that are going on. Like
yeah,
that's what I was talking to you about. I think we were talking about something else, but I was like, that much information is hard for anybody to have, and just not and not be able to express it to the world.
yeah. I try to keep things respectable, especially with people that are no longer public or are currently hostile. Um, about half the people that I remember working with in space are currently hostile here. And I'm trying to be very walk the line of yes, they were serving with me, and yes, they were real, but at the same time, not giving them any ammunition.
Yeah, no, I
So
and I hope you don't
our
mind.
our community tends to invite a lot, and that's programming. We have programming to not unite, because if we ever united, we could take down the agencies that had been using us. So they deliberately left us with programming to not work together. And that's a big deal. It's something the public doesn't understand. This was done to us on purpose. So there are a lot of people out there who I know are real SSP, real super soldiers, real Montauk survivors, but they are so hostile that you can't work with them.
I I told you I had reached out to James Ring at one point, and it was I think it was a couple years ago, and I just started doing interviews with people, and this is going to correlate with you here in a second, but I'm going to kind of bring it all together. I I asked him. I said, "Do you try to prove somebody's story right or experience right before you allowed them to do an interview with you? Like, how do you do your venting process?" And he said, I look at the hostility of it and ask them why they came forward. And I think that I should have done that from the beginning. I didn't do that with everybody,
Yeah.
and I'm guilty of that. So I used that to bring into this segment of Penny wouldn't do an interview with me for a very specific reason. And it took me a long time to realize what, like, the severity of it and how it got to that point. And I'm glad we're able to sit down and actually talk now, because I totally understood where you were coming from. And that's why you told me, like, well, if you would have pushed it, I probably would have. And I was like, well, I was trying to respect your boundaries. I didn't want
I
to push something.
appreciate that.
Yeah. So
There have been some hostiles out there who have given me death threats. And some of them have laughed about it later, saying, well, that was just a pellet gun or something. But from my perspective, I'm an older woman, I'm disabled, I have mobility issues. Uh, Currently, I'm better than I've been for a long time, but that I'm still not in great shape. And for a man approximately half my age to be threatening me, even with a pellet gun, that's a credible threat. Currently, I've got somebody else threatening to burn me alive. That's a credible threat. And I'm not particularly happy about either of them. This is not something talking about being kidnapped by the military to serve in off books programs is not something that other people should be threatening to kill me over. It just, I mean, I could see if they were CIA agents, then they would have a reason. But just other people in the community deciding they're going to threaten me, that's bullshit. So,
Even the extreme taking it to a threat is one level, but in because I call it, as well as the SSP or the super soldier community, I call it the whistleblower community
mhm,
because that's what everybody is. And when people get to a certain status, sometimes they assume that they don't have to give people the same time of day that they got, and that's
mm,
what drives me nuts. I feel like some whistleblowers put themselves above others, and yeah, they very much separate themselves from the communities. And I've heard this about a lot of people that are considered high up in the SSP community. And a lot of people will go to them to try to figure stuff out about it. And it's a very uh, it's a it's a very niche audience, first of all, the SSP
mhm,
stuff and the super soldier stuff. That's why when I was telling people about this recently, they were like, "Oh, well, he probably doesn't do it for views." I was like, "No, I don't do it for views." I was like, "This is
mm,
just a personal interest to me." Like,
yeah,
that's why, and people can tell because I get into these conversations. I have a
yeah,
thousand questions, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy it in the sense of understanding it, like trying to wrap
yeah.
my head around it all. Um,
Yeah,
I
you've
don't
been
enjoy
really
fear.
easy for me to talk to. I
Okay.
I have people that right off the bat I feel they are looking for a reason to discredit me. And I get really nervous and I trip over my tongue and I start shaking and I leave early if I can.
Oh yeah,
Um,
no, I don't. I on my channel, I never try to pick apart somebody's story.
yeah.
It's not my. I'm here to listen and maybe ask questions, and that's it. I
Well, I my memories were activated in 2013 in April, and I started getting this download as soon as I came home, and that would have made it about May 2nd. And I sat with those memories for 3 years before I told a soul. My partner knew I was dealing with something, but he didn't know what because I wasn't talking about it. And I was buying books and I was reading PDF downloads and I was going through 8 videos a day trying to figure out what it was I was remembering. Because frankly, my German wasn't good enough to understand what was in the memories. And some of it I still don't have all the details. I wasn't going to talk about it. I was going to stay quiet. I was going to work in a private Facebook group doing group therapy with other survivors. That was what I had planned to do. And somebody started shooting me with DEW, directed energy weapons. They shot me 3 times in 6 weeks. They got my partner on the first 2 tries. The third one, I was upstairs in my bed and they shot me through the kidney, and that kidney still bleeds, and that was in 2016. And I concluded that they were trying to kill me. And I talked to my partner, Lou, and I said, Bill Cooper said if you know they're going to kill you, to hide in the spotlight, to get the biggest spotlight you can find and just stand under it and tell everything you know. And I went, that first interview was with Jay Campbell and Rex Bear from um, Decoders of Truth on Facebook. And Jay believed me and Rex didn't. And that they could not get on the same page. That interview was just an absolute fucking nightmare. It's still up on YouTube somewhere. linked it on my YouTube channel that I don't use anymore. So it's there if people want to see it. But James was the first person who gave me an honest interview and let me tell my story without interrupting me. And he didn't do any vetting on me at all. He had heard that first interview and jumped. When I interview somebody, before I ask them, I listen to at least one of their prior interviews and I do a criminal background check on them. This is going to be scary, but half of the people that I have checked have had felonies, dangerous felonies. And it was when I realized this was going down that I started just asking him, I'm going to do a background check on you. Is there something that I'm going to find that you know about? You should tell me now. Now, there are certain things that go with super soldiers and SSP. Okay.
Yeah, because I would want to jump in there because just because they have a felony doesn't mean that they weren't involved. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, there are certain things that go with the community. Drug use, because you have these nightmares all the time and you just want them to go away. So I ignore drug use unless it's interfering with them speaking now. Teenage assault charges or gang involvement, those go with it because we're trained to kill. We are military. People don't understand that, no, we're not just some nice girl that was taken out into space and taught how to fly. No, we were trained soldiers, trained to kill people. I was trained to kill people with my mind. We're dangerous. And we get back on Earth and we're confused and we're frustrated, and that training pops out and we end up with the street gang because that's our peers, or it feels like it when we're on Earth. So if they had teenage assault charges, if they were in a gang in high school or junior high or younger, but they have no more charges after they were adults, then I figure, okay, seal the juvenile. Now, if they're an adult, 40 something, and they have a whole string of assaulting officers, a whole string of attempted murder, a whole string of beating the crap out of somebody for no reason at all, or they're cheating people, scammers, frauds. I don't want those people on my show. You know? And then we've got the pedophilia. 5% of the population are pedophiles. It may be a little higher amongst us because we were all raped as children. You repeat what you've learned as a child. So if they've got a pedophile conviction, I don't even bring them public. No, not the way this community feels about pedophiles. That's just asking for more trouble for them. So it has nothing to do with whether they're telling the truth or not. It has to do with they're endangering themselves by going public.
As well as the community. I feel like that would put a damper on the community as well.
Oh, yeah. There was one of our larger podcasts that were caught interviewing a convicted pedophile. And it was after that I started doing the background checks. And yeah, I pay $30 a month to be able to do a background check on people. And I'm religious about it because if you have a problem in your past and I'm bringing you forward, I need to know about it.
Am I good? Did I clear?
Yeah, you cleared.
Did you really run a background check on me? I didn't even know.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
It gives me an idea of who I'm dealing with. Now, I do believe that people who have problems can change, can correct their behavior. So I'm looking at time between the crime and now. If it was 20 years ago and you've been good since, I don't care. If it was 3 years ago and you're still threatening people, oh, hell no. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why some people have not been on my show, is because I told them I was going to do a background check and they said, oh, hell no, I'm not subjecting to that.
Oh wow.
You know, and,
I mean,
and
I assume you ran it anyway. I
no,
would.
I figured they were telling me that they were guilty and,
Right.
took them off my
I still want to.
eligible.
I'm just saying. I still want to know what they were guilty of. If I was already paying the $35 to have the info.
Yeah, I may do it eventually, but I figured there was no point if they were gonna balk about me doing it. It meant they were guilty of something.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not happy with some of the stuff going on in our community. All of those people should be taken out of the circuit. The people that are not safe for the community. We had a recent guy die. He had been in prison. He was supposed to still be in prison, but he was released because of the bug. So I'm not breaking any YouTube laws. uh,
Appreciate it.
and he was immediately put back on the speaking circuit, even though he had been convicted of tax evasion and general fraud. He had been defrauding people and pretending to be an attorney and giving legal advice without a license. And they put him right back on the circuit. That should not have happened. He was still under his sentence. He should not have been on the circuit. Period. I mean, I may be old fashioned, but I think we should be policing our own community because nobody else is gonna.
I've said this. No matter what topic I'm talking about, whether we're talking about religion, whether we're talking about personal relationships, some people have to do a little bit of self work before they can worry about anything external, and that's all you're
Exactly.
basically asking. You're asking, hey, get yourself figured out, figure out where you're at, get whatever help you need, and then come to us, and then reach out for
Exactly.
these things, because there's nothing wrong with people wanting unity in this community, but the problem with it is too many people want to divide and conquer because they haven't fixed themselves internally, so they're like, oh, not this person, but this person's okay, and I'm
Yeah.
here to unite. And it's like, no, there's a lot more to it than that.
We've got people who are real experiencers who have emperor complexes. And they're more concerned about the money than the disclosure. Okay, people think I'm making money because I go to conferences. No, I have never been paid for a conference. The speakers don't get paid unless they are keynote speaker. And that there's been a lot of controversy about me this calendar year because I was asked to be a keynote speaker and I'm not an agent. There is an unwritten law that the keynote speaker has to be a CIA agent, and I'm not one. And so suddenly, all hell broke loose. And I'm being accused of all sorts of things that people are simply pulling out of their ass. And it's irritating and annoying because if I had worked for Mickey D's for 8 years, I would have made 12,000 a year, approximately. I haven't made 12,000 in donations in the whole 8 years. I've made about half that.
I want to
So
jump in.
I'm not making money at this. And I think that's part of the reasons why some of these people hate me is because I'm not money oriented. I'm on Social Security. I have enough to live. The only thing I need donations for is to keep my Rumble and Zoom, and Odyssey charges me $5 a month. I can cover that out of my check.
I wanted to ask you because a question came up. I assume somebody missed part of what you had just said before starting this one. Boss Man was asking, did Penny say she's okay? I'm going to answer this for you. No, she was saying those were the exceptions to the rules where she doesn't care when it happened. Doesn't matter if it was 20 years ago or not. Those are the things she's not going to interview people after. He was asking if you were saying you were cool with interviewing pedos if the crime was 20 years ago. And I said, no, that was one of her original exceptions.
No, that's something. I was repeatedly raped in every body opening at 4 years old. I have no sympathy for pedos. I'm sorry. I know that most of the people in this community feel the same way that I do because they were subjected to the same thing. And we have no patience, no sympathy. And I'm not calling for them to be murdered, but a lot of my peers are. So I really think that that's something that there's you know, they're 5% of the population, but it may be higher with us. And it's something that we have to, it's something we do not tolerate, cannot tolerate, and probably need to work on our attitude about it.
Let's see. Another one popped in. How can you find the ones that are not sincere when you're venting people besides just
Okay. This comes from PsyAbilities, so I don't know if you're going to be able to do it or not.
Okay.
Okay. The real ones are exhausted. They're tired when they wake up in the morning. We have lived other lives alongside this one for our whole life. Some of us, if you added it all up, we would be 5,000 years old or older. We're just fucking tired. Number 2, the real ones have anxiety and depression at the same time, together. We're never happy. We fake it sometimes. You know, I fake being pleasant enough to be on air and not scare people. But I haven't been truly happy since I got these memories back. And I had depressive episodes before that. That's why I was on an antidepressant that I had to withdraw from. So those are the two main things. And if you can read their aura, there will be a lot of black in it. Can't help it. That's the soul scars from what we were put through. Now, some of us can do enough work that we can reduce how much of it there is. And I do the work. But other people look at me and and tell me, you have a lot of black in your aura. Well, yeah.
I agree, Terry. I've heard her stay very consistent with all of her story. I usually I'm gonna like, and I know today I'll have to do it. There's a couple things she referenced, and if I go look them up after this, they're gonna be there. There's two things she sent me links about earlier that she referenced that I could go look at right now. I just haven't pulled them up because I've been following along. Yeah, that's one thing about Penny. She's very consistent. I've always said that about her.
Well, that's because I actually lived it, and I was a I was a science geek, and that's what you do when you write science papers is you give references, and the references support what you said. If they don't support what you said, it's a waste of time to reference them.
So I want to get into some of the
True?
fun ones. It's true. It's very true. I mean, you're just it's probably just in your nature to be like, I'm saying this. Oh yeah, here's my back. Like you already have the backup evidence to prove it, and because I noticed you'd like subtly just say, oh yeah, if you want to see it, I got it. And then you just move on to the next thing, and I'm like, that's perfect. I know she has it, otherwise she wouldn't state that.
Yeah, I've got it. I don't have it online. I didn't want it available to the general public, but someone that's interviewed me and treated me well, yeah, I'll share it with you. This was before I understood everything, and I went into a regression hypnosis with a set of questions, and I had a dozen questions, and I got definitive answers to half of them, and the other half I was told I wasn't ready for yet. So I think one of them had anything to do with my SSP experience, and it was basically, why do I feel like I'm a reptilian? Because from my family tree I should be Anunnaki. And it was because the answer was that I had been DNA modified by something called military laboratories. That's the same group that's now called DARPA.
I'm out. Well, we're gonna have to. Okay, so if we go into Anunnaki, we have to explain what the 13 bloodlines are, and we have to like. I don't know how much of the audience follows in that far, so I'm
Well,
happy to go.
we can save that for another trip.
Okay, no worries.
Um, I am bloodline, and so yeah, I had when I connected up my family tree with two lineages from Robert the Bruce, I was contacted by Dragon Court of Oxford, and their representative gave me a bunch of information that I incorporated into the family tree. And it turned out I met their criteria, except that I'm Rh positive. So they are very specific. You have to be Rh negative.
I, we talked about it offline a little bit. It's
Yeah.
possible if Penny's down for it. You guys know I am.
Yeah.
I love these conversations. I'm gonna interrupt you for a minute because I want to jump on a few questions that you touched on.
More questions.
But yeah, you talked a little bit about the insects on Mars, and I want to talk about the creatures on Mars. I know there was a lot of insects and small reptilians, like reptiles, just on the ground, as well as snakes and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Can you describe to me some of the creatures, like larger creatures, like any of them that would be considered a threat, or anything that was on the surface of Mars?
The folks on Mars referred to them as bugs and lizzies. That was their basic split between the threats. Lizzie's were raptors, Jurassic Park raptors, intelligent, telepathic, 9 foot tall. Claws 6 inches long and sharp as razor blades. In an unarmed, fair fight, they will win every time. And so the American military on Mars is using them for target practice. They are deliberately genociding them so that when the humans on Mars go through a dark age, which we do about every 500 years, that those folks won't kill us. The bugs. Doris said there were flies there, but I don't remember them. So I'll just leave it at that. I do remember ants. Well, they're basically ants. They live in underground hives. They have a queen that thinks for all of them. They don't look exactly like ants because where ants have that wasp waist, these guys don't. So they're just round. They're also 8 to 9 feet tall. Usually a brown color, but they can be red or black. They're extremely telepathic. If they decide that they are going to read your mind, the Germans told us to not even try to block them. Just inform the German high command that we had been interrogated, because they would kill us, and they would still read our mind after we were dead.
I actually loved your conversation with Andy about this, because I think, and I don't know if it was because he was with the American side and you were with the German side. Were you with the German side at the time?
I was with the German side. He did not even know the Germans were there, and that is probably because of his youth when he was there. He was.
Well, and he also talks about those almost barriers at a certain point.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if you guys were actually blacked off and the units never really had crossover.
As far as I was aware, we never interacted with the Americans.
Okay.
As a fighter pilot on Mars, I would be asked to do air support for the Space Marines. I was air support for the Battle of the Blender that Captain Kramer talks about. It was my captain that had ordered that mess, and he was eviscerated by a Draco for doing that, because they had just signed the peace treaty, and the Germans had ordered it in violation of the treaty they had just signed. And the Draco said that he had no honor, and gutted him. And we put him into regen, and he had been a really arrogant SOB. And after that, he was much calmer.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that the species of reptiles that you were talking about before we jumped into the story about that you and Andy talked about, were the raptor beings, and they seemed intelligent by your guys' description.
They're smarter than we are.
Okay.
They can. They prefer telepathy.
Okay.
Telepathic races prefer telepathy because you get nuance, you get texture, you get emotions, you get the feels. It's a much richer form of communication. Verbal is primitive.
Yeah, you can't express as much through it. I get that. Yeah. That makes sense.
And The raptors are really an intelligent race. They used to be a spacefaring race, but they had they had been knocked into the Stone Age by the nuclear war. And they were just starting to come out of it into a Neolithic kind of stage, starting to have farming. And the Germans showed up and wanted their territory and destroyed that. So pushed them back into the deep Stone Age. And now the American military is exterminating them. And it's harsh. They were a spacefaring race. There is an inner earth race that is them. And they were separated by this war. And the inner earth race has devolved and is much more primitive now.
I always thought they were the original occupants of Earth.
They were.
Okay, I thought they were. Yeah, originally.
Yeah, they were.
They still do.
They still exist in inner Earth. They don't exist on the surface anymore.
Okay.
There is another reptilian race that lives in caverns. They're not deep into the hollow earth. Yes, I go by hollow earth. They're not in the hollow earth part. They're in the honeycombed part in between.
Like the crust still. They're not actually. Gotcha.
Yeah, they were on the surface until the Anunnaki showed up and created humans as we are now. So the interview with Lacerta is valid, describes them, and there are Ubaid, I guess I'm saying that right, figurines from Iraq that match her description of their species. And I recently uploaded them on my wall, so I can give you those pictures if you'd like them. In fact, how do I screen share?
There is a you're doing it on your computer, right?
Yeah, I'm on my computer.
So there should be a little box on the bottom that says present. And it's got a plus mark in it. It looks like a monitor.
Okay.
And you should be able to do it through there. You can either do a screen share or you can do a file share or...
I'm pulling up the pictures.
Okay.
So give me a minute.
Another question came across while you're pulling those up. What are the ones that look like turtles without shells? Has she seen those types?
Those are Draco warriors. Okay.
I always was under the impression that higher ranking Dracos had wings.
The higher ranking ones do sometimes. But
I just didn't know if that was an always thing or if it was just happenstance.
Okay. Can you see that one?
Yep, I'll pull it up. Give me 1 second. And put it between us.
Yeah. Yeah, that one. That's what the other reptilian race that lives in the crust, that's what they look like. And
that's why the raptors have that similar shaped head.
Yeah, the black is hair, and according to Lacerta, they had developed memories and wombs to grow babies internally, and that they started growing hair. I do not know what those knobs on their shoulders are.
They look like pads. They almost look like an armor.
Yeah, I don't know if it's clothing or if it's like small horns.
So it could just be, and I know I'm just guessing right now, but it reminds me of like the boring machines, the teeth on the boring machines. And if they were an underground species of any kind, it'd be interesting if they had like shoulder pads that were similar to like a boring machine.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so there's, let me pull up the turtles since they were mentioned. I found a really good version of that one. Uh,
What do you? I've always actually wondered. I kind of wondered this too. How old do you think humanity is on this planet? Like, what do you think the age of civilization, and not necessarily as we know it, because I'm under the impression that it's restarted a few times. Like you said, we go into the dark ages every 500 years or something like that. And
um,
I'm wondering if it's been around longer than we think.
okay, there is a theory out there. Damon T. Barry put it forward in his series of videos that we rise to the stage where we go out into space, and then the space people come and push us back to the Stone Age. And he tracked it through cave art. And
This is an interesting. What would you say it was? Barry? What was it? That was the last name?
Barry, it was Damon T. Barry.
Okay.
I have it. Okay, application window. This guy. This guy is what Draco warriors look like.
All right. Oh, these are the turtle looking ones?
These are the turtle looking ones.
It does look like a Ninja Turtle.
Yeah. One of those guys was at Montauk when I was there in 61, 62.
Which race, if not all, are interested in the consumption of humans?
I don't think these guys do. The alphas are the ones that do. I got that one from DeviantArt, but that's what an alpha drac really looks like. They come in white, the royals. The reds are sometimes royals. This color, a muddy brown that goes with it. And some of them are flat black. So
I always thought, yeah, because I always thought, and I've seen this just on this planet when like I've been to Florida a few times, and when you see iguanas or something that's let out and they get to a certain size, their skin is not that bright green anymore. It almost gets
yeah,
darker and
yeah,
browner. And I wonder if it just comes with age or what.
it could. Did you? Can you change it so the audience can see the alpha? I
Is
know
there?
there. I brought it up. It should be there.
Oh yeah, everybody can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the background right there. It's between us right now.
Okay.
I can put us down on the side too. But yeah, it's right in the center.
Because I'm seeing the turtle. I'm not seeing the
Oh,
alpha.
that's the only one I have right now.
Okay.
I can remove that off, and you can give me a
Okay.
different.
Okay. I got this from DeviantArt, but I can't remember the artist's name. But this is what the alphas look like,
Okay.
and they run 12 feet
Like
tall.
that's what I okay, so that's what I was picturing when you said Draco. Like that's what I think of.
Okay, that's the alphas,
And
and
do they have more
they are from
dragon?
they are from a star called Thuban, and the turtle people are from a different star in the same constellation.
Are they more like what would you consider a dragon? Are they more that?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're what we would consider a dragon. Um, they're not the 40-foot tall version, but there are some of those. They're called Siakar. And there are folks out there currently who conflate all of these into the same thing and call them all reptiles, but they're different species from different homeworlds. And they behave differently. There are there are there are 7 species in the Draco Empire that are a caste system that they operate the empire and have for a very, very long time. Um, there are people who claim that they've been there forever, that they came from another universe. I don't know about all of that. I know they claim to have descended from the 40-foot dragons.
Okay.
So I presume they know their origins better than I do.
Um. Yeah, that's. I would go with what they said. They don't seem like the people you want to cross.
No.
What was the other? I wanted to ask, and I don't know if we covered this. I don't think we totally covered it. If we did, we just touched on it for a minute. But can you explain to me the different programs? Like, I know not Nakenwaffen. I don't want to pronounce it wrong. Is it Nakenwaffen?
Nachtwaffen.
Nathwaffen.
Yeah.
I'm not good at my German pronunciation yet.
It's okay.
But that
most
one,
Americans aren't.
That one, the Kruger one. Can you tell me the difference of like what these people did and what each program was kind of trying to accomplish?
Okay, when they decided that they were going to mind fracture children, the guys doing it, the scientists, got this bright idea that they could make mercenary companies with other alters of these same kids, and that they would take tissue samples and create clone bodies for these alters to live in. So there were 2 scientists, and they got into a fight over the use of black goo. Monarch Solutions is one of them. The first one we heard about, it's the one that Max Spears talks about. Okay, they use black goo. All of their assets are on black goo. Black goo is a AI, and it takes over. It makes you extra smart. It keeps you healthy until one day it decides it can't keep you healthy anymore, and it will leave your body. You will throw up this stuff, and you're not on like an injection full. You're on a gallon of this stuff. So when you throw up, it's
This is
lots
the same, and this is the same goo that's in the German regeneration tanks that you were talking about. But
yeah,
that was deactivated almost.
The one in the regeneration tanks is no longer alive. It's back to being just an artificial intelligence, back to being bots. So when it's in you, it's alive and it takes over. And so you are with this AI, but it's more running the show than you are. So if you want to do something it doesn't, you have to really fight to get your own way.
I hate to make this reference all the time, but is it similar? Like, because I hate to reference movies, but it helps. I think it helps the audience to kind of picture these things if they can. is it anything similar to what they have in the beginning of Prometheus, where they have an alien race come to the planet and they drink a small little cup of black goo, and it breaks down his DNA and it seeds humanity, I believe?
Well, you drink it, but it's a lot more of it than that. I drank it in a ceremony when I was about 15 because it was a requirement for the job I was supposed to do. So, when the Germans got out into space, they found out really quick that everybody else was bigger, smarter, and stronger than them, and they were being taken advantage of. Like here on Earth, stupid people are treated poorly and taken advantage of. That was what was happening to the Germans out in space. And so they needed an equalizer. And the Draco offered them black goo, and they took it. Now, they don't give it to all of their people. They give it to people who are going to be officers and are going to be in positions where they require higher intelligence. Because it does all the things that it's said to do, but it also takes away your humanity. You no longer have emotions except for anger. You don't love anybody. You're very logical. You go directly to what is the most practical, logical solution on something, and you don't get taken advantage of by ETs. And the Germans in space needed that buffer. And they keep all those people in their military. They don't let them into civilian life. I was never allowed to be around civilians because they said I was too dangerous.
Was it, would they consider you the danger, or did they consider the alters part of the danger? Is it the
I don't know. They never went into details. It was I was too dangerous to be allowed around civilians.
Okay. So that was the Nackenwaffen program.
Okay, they I've been calling it Nachtwaffen because that's the closest I can remember to the actual name the Germans use. Okay, in this German breakaway civilization, they call going into space ins der Nacht, into the night. And Waffen means weapons or fleets, and it's plural. So it's a poetic way of saying space fleet. And so that's the name that I heard when I was thinking, Dark Fleet doesn't cut it. The Germans are not going to call themselves Dark Fleet. They're not going to use terms in English. And I've heard other people who worked for ICC, planetary corporations, say tack a Regier onto the end of it. And that's how you can tell they weren't really in Nachtwaffen, because that's an insult. It's like calling them a paper tiger. Okay? You don't use a Spanish word on the tail end of a German phrase if you're a German. And I've explained this to them carefully, and they still continue to tack Regier onto the end. So I'm pretty sure that's what Planetary Corporations calls them.
So when you talk about, man, I could get into 100 more questions. I don't know how much time you have left tonight, but if we have to wrap up, that's totally fine as well. But
I kind of need to be off
not a problem.
In a half hour or so.
I mean, we can do it. We can wrap up now. I have a feeling we'll have more conversations in the future, hopefully. But just with the German off-planet fleet, did it start at a certain point? Was the moon involved? Were people trying to go to the moon first and establish bases there? I always wondered about the presence on the moon. Not a lot of people in the SSP community really talk about it. I feel a lot of Mars talk, and I've heard a lot of off-planet activity, but I haven't heard directly moon-related stuff.
Okay, I was not on the moon.
Okay.
I do have an altar in Kruger. That's the other of the pair from the doctors that were doing the mind fracture.
Where your commander was James Rink in that fracture as well too, or
No,
different commander?
that one I'm put into a cyborg body and treated as if I'm a pure machine, and I run a shuttle between Earth and Mars. Earth, Moon, Mars. It's a loop, never ending. I go from one to the other to the other to the back. And it's faster than the Americans talk about because it's hours. It's not months. But when I have had bleed over from that altar, it's just simple animal awareness. I'm aware I'm awake. And I know what my job is, and I register. But most of the actual memory is in the machine part.
Okay.
And I've transported James and his crew.
So was the Kruger missions, were those American ran, or what were they?
They're American ran.
Okay, so that was in that.
So is Monarch. So is Monarch. They're American ran.
I knew Monarch was. So in that alternate, you were there as a would it be a cyborg American ran mission to Mars? I mean, not Mars, the moon.
It was. I'm just a shuttle pilot.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Just a shuttle pilot. I have no memories of being on the moon.
Okay.
I do know from Shula on Mars, where they sent me to school. They teach that they first came into space just after World War I. And they went to the moon first. They found out everything there was already owned by someone else. And they tried to make lease agreements so they could have a base. And the Draco were the only one that allowed them to. So they had a base, and it was on Draco territory, but the cost was outrageous. They wanted thousands of humans to be food in exchange for it. And the same deal was made when they went to Mars, and they were on Mars just after World War II. And the Americans joined them in the early 60s. The movie Alternative 3 is historical fiction. The characters are fake, but the story's real.
What's it called? Alternative 3?
Alternative 3. When President Eisenhower was confronted by reality, and there's discussion whether he had 2 visits with ETs or 4 visits with ETs. I'm not sure. I wasn't involved in those. But there's enough evidence that he really was at Edwards Air Force Base, and he really was at Holloman Air Force Base, and the others I've not seen evidence for. In fact, I did a clip compilation on my channel on Odyssey. That was, I think it's the one that I called the Dead Witnesses. I think it's the one that talks about his meetings with ETs. But there's a lot going on out there. When they developed space flight, I blanked. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. We were talking about
Hyperspace. Hyperspace drives are time machines. Because when you go through this in between space, you can come back in any time you want. So they deliberately, in that wartime zone, they deliberately went back 400 years in time and started picking up dead soldiers in battles or people that died from the plague, men and women. And they started taking these people and making colonies on Mars and Ceres and all of these little planetoids throughout the solar system. They went back in time and got these. And they knew about
did they have to regen? Like, is that why they went back in time, so they could regen and then just colonize an area?
What they were doing was they needed people who could live without electricity and running water. Somebody who could live primitive and establish the infrastructure that they needed to create a civilization. And so they would try to get all the people from the same place so they would speak the same dialect. Now, I was part of their later version of that program where they were literally imitating the mythology of the Valkyries. Yeah. So they were trying very hard to not screw with the timeline.
So that's specific. Well, and that makes a lot of sense. You see it with any projects involving time travel, that they try to get people that won't be missed, whether it's pulling somebody off of a battlefield or street kids, or they're trying to pick somebody that people won't notice is gone.
Well, it's not that they won't notice it's gone, it's that history won't notice it's gone. So they had to check this historical records and make sure that they weren't accidentally getting somebody that was supposed to make a difference. So they got all these people that were dead or dying.
Well, and you had you had the option of waiting 400 years to see how it turned out, regardless.
Yeah, because we already had the records from the 400 years to see how they turned out.
Yeah.
So we went back in time. We got these people. The hard part was getting women because we did not want women that died in childbirth because we did not want our colony to have that problem. Yeah, that we went that detailed into it. You can't get somebody that's dying in childbirth, but you can get somebody that dies from the plague. So we had to be really careful about it. Sometimes we would go into convents and take nuns to be able to get women. Yeah.
That would be because that big of a time jump, exposure is probably a huge thing. Like whatever they're exposed, like what humans were exposed to 400 or 500 years ago is way different than what we're exposed to now. Germs, everything. So just trying to bring somebody like that into, modern society and
Yeah.
then putting them off planet. But I want to give us some time to wrap up. There's one last question I had that it probably should have been one of my first questions. How's Lou doing?
Lou is 75. He had a fall a couple of months ago. He was up on the roof doing something with the coolers, and he slipped on the ladder, and
I'm really sorry to hear that.
he ended up having to go to the ER, and he limped for a while. His hip still bothers him from it, but other than that, he's good as gold.
I'm glad he's recovering well. Yeah, no, I usually, it's usually one of my first casualties is asking how the significant others are, and I
Yeah,
apologize.
he's been really, really, really good to me. Um, the county is now paying him to take care of me, and that's helped a lot because my check isn't enough to do squat with. If I didn't have him, I would be homeless. And yeah, I recognize that, and I do try to treat him well. So sometimes I'll take him out to dinner since I blew out my knee in November. It ended up the final diagnosis was a cyst had exploded and torn the meniscus.
Ooh,
So I ended up in a wheelchair for about 6 weeks.
okay.
And I've been working really hard, and I was walking with a cane when I started physical therapy about a month ago. And I'm walking without the cane now, so I hope I'll be good for the conference next month.
Yeah, that's exactly what I actually had said to you when you first hopped on. I was like, look at the way she's moving around. I said last time she wasn't moving around as well, and we had a good convo. Speaking of the
Well,
conference next month,
I've lost 25 pounds since November too.
speaking of the conference next month, this one came in kind of early. Tonight's guest of at the Jimmy Water Show will be one of the main speakers at Full Disclosure Movement .org event on July 15th through the 18th in St. Pete Beach, Florida.
Uh-huh.
All right. Is that the one you were referring to?
Yep. Greater. I only do one a year.
Okay.
Um, Whoever gets me exclusive for the year.
Nice.
And I'm presenting on declassified mind control technologies. Now, I'm going to be on several panels, and I'm going to be available to talk to people. So if people want to hear the SSP part, fine. I'll be there to talk about it. But the presentation is research into what's been declassified. I had a mind control technology presentation that I wrote in 2018, and this is an update on that. So it's beyond V2K. So there are other people that are going to be talking about V2K, and I'm going to let them talk about it.
What kind
Um,
of other guests there are going to be there that you're excited to run into? Not maybe not the ones that you don't necessarily want to run into.
Everybody at the conference are people I'm excited to see.
Good. Good.
Brian is the producer, and he actually asked me what my dream schedule was, who I wanted to see. And he tried to get them all. So,
Nice. That's awesome.
yeah, it worked out real well. It's going to be fabulous. Uh, all of the people going, we all get along.
And everybody's thanking us for the show. Everybody really appreciated it. Yeah, I appreciate you so much for coming on.
Well,
And
thanks for
sorry,
inviting
sorry
me.
we waited so long. And I hope you have a good rest of your evening. And I'll reach out to you soon, and maybe we can set something up in the future. But
Okay.
glad you're doing better and getting healthier, and moving around better, and best of luck at the upcoming conference as well.
Thank you.
All right, everybody have a great night. Thank you.